the hearing examiner. I've been asked to convene a public hearing to consider a variance request made by Northwest Perfection through its representative Erik Flannigan, seeking a variance from primarily steep slope setbacks, buffers, and also a reasonable use exception to allow construction of a single-family residence on approximately 1 acre residential lot located at 545 Southwest Ellerwood Street in the city. In advance of today's hearing, I've received the staff report authored by Mr. Yormick, who is present today, together with a host of associated reports. I have reviewed both the staff report and all the other reports in their entirety, and am familiar with all materials that have been presented. I have not physically inspected the site, but I have done so virtually through Google Street Maps. So while that's not quite the same as an on-site inspection, it's fairly good. And I do have a fairly good understanding of the site and its surroundings. So the purpose of today's hearing, as most of those in attendance know, is threefold. It's to hear from city staff, following up on their staff report and the recommendations they make, followed then by an opportunity for the applicant to add to or subtract from what city staff has recommended, followed then by an opportunity for public comment. This hearing is taking place in a hybrid format, with both in-person opportunities to appear, but primarily through remote attendance. I'm appearing remotely, and it appears that virtually all of the parties are doing so as well. It is unclear if there are any members of the public present. Currently, there do not appear to be, but there may be, and we'll come back to that to determine if, in fact, there are, and if they wish to be heard. If there are members of the public who do want to be heard, once they have testified, we'll then return both to city staff and to the applicant for any responses to those public comments. All those who testified today, including city staff, will be sworn under oath, and we'll get underway with the testimony of the city. So that will be Mr. Yormick. Mr. Yormick, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. I did prepare a small presentation that I will share my screen. And if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint following this meeting, I can provide that to you.
Yes, I would, Mr. Yormick. I always like to make PowerPoints and exhibits. And so in this case, I note that we have currently, it says 15, but that's 15 not counting the staff report. So the staff report would be 16, and your PowerPoint would be 17. Okay.
Following this hearing, I will email it to you with or I'll send it to Candy to forward on to you, and I will label it, name it Exhibit 17.
Great, thank you.
All right, can everybody see the slide?
I can, yes.
Okay, is it just the slide that's appearing for you?
Yes.
Okay. So how it's shown on my screen is different. So I just wanted to make sure you're just seeing the slide. So good morning, everyone. I'm Douglas Yormick, environmental planner with the city of Issaquah, and was the project planner for the Northwest Perfection Ellerwood residence variance. As discussed previously, this is located on Southwest Ellerwood Street in the Squawk Mountain neighborhood. This is on the south end of the city. The zoning is single-family suburban in the low-density residential land use designation. The size is approximately 1 acre, and the site is vacant. There are steep slope critical areas on site pretty much throughout the entire property, and moderate coal mine hazard. Um, so the purpose of this is to construct a single family residence. The site is almost completely encumbered with steep slope critical areas. The applicant has provided geotechnical analysis for both the coal mine and the steep slopes. And with the coal mine, there was a previous report from 2005 that indicated a portion of the site had severe coal mine hazard. Icicle Creek has revised that, and that is now I think it's exhibit 15, the updated coal mine hazard, which shows that the actual severe coal mine hazard is off-site and not currently on the property, and that the entire site is moderate. And with our land use code, moderate coal mine hazard does not have any buffers or setbacks. So since there is no buildable area outside of the steep slope or steep slope buffers, the applicant is seeking a variance and a reasonable use exception for the construction of a single family home. Background information is that this site went through a similar process back in 2010 and was approved for development in similar nature, single family residence on the lot. Here is the site plan that was provided to us showing the location of the home footprint and the disturbance that will occur within the steep slope buffer and steep slopes. They are currently proposing it on the north end closest to Ellerwood Street to minimize disturbances on the site. Since this is a level 3 review, public notification and public hearing is required. Notice of application was sent on December 17th of 2021. Because this site also contains critical areas, a community conference or community meeting had to occur. That occurred on March 11th, 2020, or we issued the notice on March 11th, 2024, and the meeting was held March 21st. The meeting was held in a hybrid format, both virtually, and the in-person portion was held at the Steelhead Room, one of the rooms for the city. Issued a SEPA determination on August 5th. There was a 14-day comment and appeal period. Received no comments, no appeals were filed. And a determination of non-significance was issued and posted on the SEPA register, sent to parties of record and our SEPA distribution list. And we did not receive any comments from outside agencies. Notice of hearing was issued on March 16th, and the hearing is today, August 27th. What's that?
Issued August 16th, not March 16th.
Yeah, thank you. Level 3 permits require public notice, public hearing, and a hearing examiner's decision based on recommendations from staff. 2 city divisions within community planning and development reviewed this variance, planning, myself, and engineering. Other divisions will review the subsequent building permits for the construction of the home and for the associated wall. Externally, Haley Aldrich is our geotechnical peer review consultant who reviewed the peer review or the geotech materials provided by the applicant. And the code primarily used is chapters 18.210 for variance and 18.802 for steep slope critical areas and reasonable use exception. So in IMC 18.802.130, there's a minimum of a 50-foot buffer measured from the top or toe of any steep slope. And then there is an additional 15-foot building setback from that buffer. Steep slopes are defined as anything greater than 40%. We do have in our code standards for reducing the steep slope buffer. and that can be reduced to 10 feet with a 15-foot setback through geotechnical analysis. And even through the steep slope buffer reduction, there still would have to be impacts to both the buffer and the steep slope. So the applicant has provided materials for a variance and reasonable use exception. As proposed, the still missing some information such as building height, but as proposed, the footprint itself meets all applicable development standards for single-family suburban zone. Following the notice of application back in December of 2021, we had 2 comments provided, both by one individual. Those comments and responses are included as exhibits in this with the staff report. We did not receive any comments following the SEPA determination, and we had 1 comment following the notice of hearing, which was from the same individual who was just asking for clarification on off-site disturbances. I received that email over the weekend and responded to him yesterday. So 18-204-020 decision-making authority for level 3 variances is with the hearing examiner, and the purpose of preparing a staff report and making recommendations to decision makers to facilitate the review and decision-making process. So with that, staff recommends approval with conditions. We have 10 conditions that are included in the staff report. And with that, questions?
A few, Mr. Yormick, but first an observation. Excellent staff report. I really am impressed by it. It's again, this is the first such hearing I've had for Issaquah, of course, but I do 20-some cities, a couple of counties. Your report was the equal of anything I've seen in any of those jurisdictions. So job well done. It was quite thorough. It does leave a few questions though, and let's go through those. The 2010 previous decision, tell me about it. What anything noteworthy about its decision, about its findings or its conditions, and is a copy available to me?
So I'll answer the last one. Yes, a copy is available to you or for you. I can provide that with the staff report as well. I believe we have an electronic version of that staff report and hearing examiner decision. So I'll send you the hearing examiner decision.
Okay, and we'll make that Exhibit 18.
Okay. Exhibit 18.
Okay.
There is nothing.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to answer the first part of your question. There's nothing noteworthy about that decision. It follows pretty much what we laid out in this staff report. The home size is slightly different. It's a little smaller. And that's probably the biggest difference between it. And the reason why nothing was constructed is the previous owner, whoever went through that variance process, never submitted a complete building permit application within 3 years of the decision.
Okay. All right, thanks. And I'll look forward to having that to compare. Tell me about the crossroads between variance requirements and reasonable use requirements for Issaquah. I hope that question makes sense, but how do you see these two intersecting?
So under our old code, so we just revamped our entire land use code back in 2023, and we had slightly different wording for both and how the process worked out, and that language is not so much included anymore. So how it worked under our old code was that you would apply for a variance, and then it was during the hearing examiner can then state this should be a reasonable use exception and review it under the criteria for reasonable use exception. With how the code's written now, it appears if you are varying the standards in 18802, then it gets reviewed under the reasonable use exception.
And if so, how do the variance standards, do they overlay? How are they applied?
Yeah, several of the standards in both the variance and the reasonable use exception overlap each other. There are more for the variance, but they are pretty similar in nature.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
I'm intrigued by this retaining wall. It sounds like the biggest residential retaining wall I've ever experienced. Uh, I, it seems as if it is likely to be 28 feet in height, if I'm following the geotech report correctly. Is there anything about that wall that worries or is noteworthy from the city's perspective?
Um, so far, no. I mean, it would be reviewed with recommendations of the geotech report, and based on that information, there doesn't appear to be anything that are red flags. We did not review the wall based on what our code says, and so that would happen with the subsequent building permit. That wall will require its own building permit separate from the building permit for the home itself.
I saw that. Mr. Canfield, the neighbor, uh, expressed concern about the wall running to the property boundary
Mhm.
to be located within the setback. What's the city's response to that concern?
Um, that it would be reviewed with, hold on, I've got,
Let me try that a slightly different way. I didn't
yeah.
ask it very cleanly. I take it the wall is not considered or is exempt from the setback requirements.
Yes, to an extent, there's height requirements within the setback area um, that would be reviewed under the wall section of our land use code. And we did not review because we don't have a whole lot of information on the wall, and this is kind of preliminary in nature. So we did not comment or review it against the wall standards in our land use code.
So perhaps for my benefit, perhaps equally for the applicant's benefit, what is likely to be expected of the applicant relative to the wall, relative to the property's boundaries?
I'm gonna pull up that code, so I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm catching you cold on this question,
Yeah.
so you can take some time.
Okay.
May I possibly interject? I have a few, I think I might be able to answer part of this question.
Sure. Let's have you sworn, Ms. Bennington.
Okay,
So do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
While Mr. Yormick is looking at any of his additional materials, what would you like to add to that conversation?
Based on the current site plan we have developed, the portions of the wall that exceed the maximum height allowance within the setback are located outside of those setback areas. So the only portion of wall that extends into the setback meets the maximum wall height requirement allowed in that area. So obviously it'll be developed further with the building permit, as Doug mentioned, but currently we are projecting that the taller walls will be located within the building setback.
Okay. And so within the side yard setbacks, what's the maximum height allowed?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I believe it is 4 feet. Trying to figure out. Here's our wall heights. Doug, is it 4 feet? Within
That's
the
what
setback?
I just found the code now, so I'm
Okay.
reviewing it.
So Ms. Bennington, this would be sort of a parabola then. It would begin at a relatively low height of 4 feet at or near the boundary line, and then increase in height as it moves toward the center of the property.
Correct.
Okay.
But so I have the code now. So it's in this situation, rockeries or retaining walls used to protect a cut into an existing grade may not exceed the greater of the minimum height necessary to support the cut, or 6 feet.
6 feet. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then if it's greater than 6 feet, must be set back from the property line by 1 1/2 feet for every 1 foot over the 6 foot height limit.
Okay.
And that's IMC 18-810-100 B3 is the code.
And Doug, I'm seeing that we have an 8-foot side yard setback.
Yes.
So if we are outside of that 8-foot side yard setback, is there a height restriction then on the wall?
I believe at that point it's have to look into this further, because this no taller than 10 feet, and then there can be step backs from that.
So Ms. Bennington, was I correct in the potential 28-foot high wall?
The highest portion of the wall is located outside of the setbacks at
Right.
the rear of the house. So if you're looking at the site plan, the portion of the wall that is closest to the neighboring property is labeled with the number 1. And in our wall keynotes, that's a height of 6 feet, and that is a cut wall. So that would comply with the code that Doug just mentioned. And then all other portions of the wall are outside of the setback areas and within the buildable part of the lot. So during building permit, if there's additional setbacks, we'll have to look at those for the wall height.
My only question is, was I correct that this retaining wall could grow to about 28 feet in height?
Oh, yes. The maximum height we have right now is 28 feet, and that portion is located well outside the setbacks.
Right. Okay. So it's a wall at or near the boundary line would begin at 6 feet and then grow in height to approximately a center point of 28 feet and then descend again to the other boundary line.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Mr. Yormick, is there a requirement for a buffer from that retaining wall to the rear of the proposed house?
No, there's not. It would just be based on geotech recommendations.
Okay. As this morphs from a variance to a reasonable use exception request, then we come into this reasonableness standard for the application. A key component of that being the nature of the construction and its whether the size of the house is reasonable. So this is a proposed residence that's roughly 2,100 square feet. And so how would you respond to any concerns that 2,100 square feet of residence is not reasonable?
In Exhibit 8, the applicant provided neighboring site analysis, and with that, it shows the approximate footprint of several homes within the general vicinity. And with their proposed home, it falls somewhere around the median of the homes that are in the surrounding area. So it's not proposing something that the footprint is exceptionally large compared to, but falls within the middle of what has been constructed in that neighborhood.
Okay, and does the city concur with that?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about the NGPE, the proposed conservation easement for the upper portion of the property. In Issaquah, what is expected and how might it work?
For a situation like this, they would just record the remainder of the lot with King County and provide us with a copy of the recorded easement. That easement will then show up in our GIS. So it would be visible for staff to see the NGPE. It'll provide the recording number when selected, and we would be able to get that information from it. Since this isn't part of a plat, this isn't going to get recorded with this, like a subdivision or a short plat. The applicant would just have to have that recorded with King County and provide us a copy during building permit application.
What are the practical ramifications of that recording? What can the applicant do or not do once it's recorded, that NGPE?
It would not be able to be developed at all. Must be, just remain as is in perpetuity is how it's written in our code. There can be some clearing of vegetation, replanting of vegetation, specifically if there's a dead or dying tree that has the potential to strike the home, they can go through a process with the city to have that tree removed. But mainly you can't do anything within that NGPE that would constitute development.
Okay, and things such as herbicide application or weed clearing, or those sorts of things allowed in this category?
Yes and no. You can do some clearing, mostly of just invasive species. I did walk the site, did not see a whole lot of invasive species on the hillside. It is pretty well vegetated with native vegetation, decent shrub cover, tall mature trees. If there is removal, it's largely has to be done using handheld tools. That's what's written in our code for removal of vegetation in critical areas.
Okay. And then the last question about vegetation is the tree removal for the project itself. There's approximately 50 trees to be removed. What are the city standards for tree removal and replacement? Does this trigger any replacement requirements?
So far, based on the information that was provided with this variance, no. The 35% of, and this is where it gets a little tricky because there isn't developable area, but there's a small developable area on like the south portion of the site, kind of on top of the hill.
Right.
So in residential development, 35% of the total caliber inches of trees within the developable site area must be retained. So they are demonstrating that with that small buildable area on the south portion of the site and the trees that are in the north portion of the site around where they're going to be developing, 35% of those trees would remain, and those standards would be reviewed with the building permit for the single family residence.
So more likely than not, tree replacement will not be required as part of the project's conditions.
We have a condition for revegetating the disturbed area, just to increase or increase slope stability and just to ensure that, the site remains well vegetated.
And that just simply requires a landscaping plan that may or may not require trees, but something that'll hold that bank in place. Okay, all right. I think that's all my many questions. I do appreciate all of those thorough answers. So, did anything I asked Mr. Yormick spawn any additional comments that you wanted to make?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and you're not anticipating any other staff testifying, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, that concludes then the city's presentation, and so we'll turn to the applicant. Ms. Bennington, are you the spokesperson, or should I expect Mr. Flannigan to be so, or a combination? What should I anticipate here?
I believe Erik would be the spokesperson unless he feels otherwise.
So, Mr. Flannigan, do you wish to be heard on this matter?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let me make some notes to that effect. So, Mr. Flannigan, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Do you have any wish? Okay, Mr. Yormick has removed the PowerPoint, so we're back to a person screen. So go ahead and tell me what you'd like to say in response to this city's our presentation.
First and foremost, thank you to Doug and everyone that's been involved with this process. It's been an honor, so to speak, to kind of be involved with the city of Issaquah, the team that's here, and the community in itself. This is our first new construction build. Jason Barnett, my business partner, he's on the call as well. This is our first house that we built. We kind of bit off a big cookie on this one, of course, but since the start of this project, we've really kind of gotten the feeling and, the feedback from the city that, this process is not easy. I doubled up. Sorry about that. This process is not going to be easy, but for good reason. So I've been a general contractor for a decade now. And throughout, those 10 years, we've built everything from smaller residences to remodeling. We primarily handle, residential exteriors in and around this area. And so whenever we took this project on, we fully understood that, there's going to be a lot of intricacies with this particular property that have to be handled very carefully. And I'll say that I really don't envy, some of the things that a lot of these folks have to deal with in terms of, making sure that the community is safe and it's not just a building free for all, so to speak. And while going through this, there's been certain aspects that are daunting. One of the things is the wall, of course, but in doing this for as long as we have and kind of having the relationships and resources that we have an amazing team that's, on board. Miss Bennington, my business partner, Jason, Doug, is incredible. And as far as our land use coordination stuff, our drill team, our engineers that have been involved all the way down to the arborist and our tree guy. I mean, they're particularly chosen for many reasons. They're not just, they're not just well versed in the area, but have done it for many years, have, worked with the city of Issaquah themselves. Icicle Creek, all of the relationships and partnerships that we've chosen for this project have been specifically targeted towards success of the project, of course. That, that is to say that some steps along this process have kind of, been a little bit of head scratching, so to speak. But I'll say that, Jason and I's team and the partnerships that we work with are, very carefully decided to make sure that, we're not just coming up with some kind of, plan to throw at this hillside, or, trying to build just some house to make money. That's not the goal here. It's to really honestly complement, what we like building, which is, unique homes, of course, safety's first, but something that the neighborhood, the community, and even the city themselves can kind of stand back and say, hey, these guys designed and developed something well enough that we're proud of. That's kind of, at the end of the day, what we enjoy doing the most. Whether it's a small build or a large project like this, I'm young enough to where, in another 10 or 20 years, I want to, stand back and say, yeah, it's something that, if we develop a standard to, what our process is, that the entire team as a whole can be proud of. And, kind of back to the basis, I don't envy what some of these teams have to deal with. I do, quite a bit of research. I watched the city hall meetings. I've watched several of these other variance meetings as well. And there's quite a bit of information that I obviously didn't know as being my first new construction build, that, has to be very intricately not only understood, but, handled, so that, again, you're not just kind of throwing mud on the wall and hoping something sticks. When we started this process in, 2021 or so, I didn't know the extent of kind of where we were going with it, so to speak. But we knew that, if it was possible in the past, it's possible now. You just, you have to dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure that, everyone in the community is satisfied, and in particular, the city themselves. And I think, I think we've developed a team that has been able to, take that responsibility on board and try and make sure that we kind of end up with a product that everyone's happy with.
Okay, thank you. A couple of slightly different questions than your presentation, Mr. Flannigan, but the proposed building design better than anyone. So, and its location on the site and its location relative to adjoining properties. So I'm curious as to how you view its proposed location relative to the two properties that adjoin. North, or east and west, are slightly hard to use here because this is a diagonally oriented property. But if you will, the property to the east of the site, which has an existing residence, and then the property to the west, which is vacant. How do you envision this proposed construction relative to those two properties?
The one word that comes to mind immediately is complementary. The property to the east has, the footprints are a little different, but if you do look at the hillside altogether, if we go from high down to low, the property to the east has a very large cut out of the hillside, similar to what we're doing. It's not quite as steep, but it is, in terms of length, relatively similar to what we are doing. The slope where that home is a little less, and there's an access road that's right there that was placed there for reasons, obviously, for the slope. But it's very complementary to that house in itself. So it's it's not an ornate build or anything like that. It's very similar in construction. Same thing with the property to the west. So I believe that home's a little bit older. That was one of the first houses that was built on that portion of Squaw Mountain. But again, complementary. So the square footage is very similar. The style and design of the home is very complementary. We're not building anything that's modern or out of place. It kind of fits with our business and building description of Northwest home. It's a Northwest contemporary house. There's nothing that's offensive to the build or anything like that. It's truly designed in our thought, and what we imagine putting on the property does complement not only those houses, but really the entirety of Squawk Mountain, where it's they're not spec houses. They're not just kind of as quick as, or cheap and easy homes. There's some time put into them, and it's complementary of what the neighborhood is. And we've done another build just at the top of the mountain as well, where we a remodel rather, and that process took about a year for us to do it. And I can't say how many neighbors complimented and were happy with us. And we kind of actually got to know the neighborhood quite a bit. So every time we're up there, we kind of feel involved with it, so to speak. So short answer is the home is very complimentary.
All right, I appreciate that. Anything else you'd like to
add? Thank you. Honestly, it's a privilege to be able to do this and be a part of the process. Like I said, sometimes it's a little daunting, but I've enjoyed every step of the way, and I look forward to more in the future and being a part of this team. It's really cool.
And from those comments, Mr. Flannigan, I assume the applicant has no objection to the proposed conditions as recommended by city staff.
No, absolutely not. We're we're here
Okay.
to do what you need.
All right. Ms. Bennington, you've heard Mr. Flannigan's testimony. You've provided a little bit of testimony earlier. Do you want to supplement that earlier testimony?
No, I don't think so. I think the city's conditions are very reasonable, and we will certainly meet all those conditions when we go in for our building permit and for the house and the walls.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard now from both city staff and the applicant, which gets us to the public hearing portion. Again, this being a hybrid hearing, it can sometimes be difficult to determine whether there are members of the public both present and if so, wishing to be heard. Candace, do you have a sense as to whether any of the people appearing on screen are members of the public as opposed to simply interested parties?
There, to the best of my knowledge, there's nobody that are members of the public.
Okay.
Two,
So let me.
two individuals here with the applicant.
What's that?
The two individuals here are with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask, are there any members of the public present either in person or remotely who wish to be heard regarding this application? And Candace, are you receiving any raised hands or anything else indicating a request?
I am not.
Okay, so the record will reflect that there are no members of the public present, and that no public comment has been received. This project is, it should be noted, has received relatively little comment except from the adjoining landowner, Mr. Canfield, whose comments I think have been responded to by city staff. There having been no public comment, Mr. Yormick, the only thing you would perhaps need to respond to is the applicant's presentation. Is there anything about it that you want to respond to?
No.
Okay, not surprising. And therefore that concludes the hearing today. I'm going to go ahead and grant the requested variance. It's well explained. It's fully understandable. It's been carefully examined, and proper restraints have been imposed upon development consistent with protecting the environment while still allowing some reasonable use of the property. I think city staff has done a very good job of that analysis, and I concur with the analysis. So I find no reason to deny the request. The tricky part now is reducing that to findings and conclusions. So although I've rendered an oral decision, before I can enter my written one, I need to reduce all of this to written findings. And because of the complications of the site, those findings are a bit complicated as well. So you'll need to give me a few days to do that. But certainly I will do so within the time allowed by the city. So I will get working on that right away. I will prepare those findings, conclusions, and the decision itself, subject to the conditions that have been imposed by staff. I'm not adding any conditions to those, and I'll have that back to the city as quickly as I can. Are there any last questions about that?
No
Mr.
questions from me. I will make sure to get you those additional exhibits today.
Thank you. Just a reminder that my decision is sort of a key unlocking that outside door. To get your other required permits, you have to have my decision. I understand that. I understand how if I take too long, I'm delaying your project, and that's never my intent. So I do understand and will try to get this back to the city as quickly as I can. With that, I want to thank everybody who attended today and those who participated, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.